Hey everyone, Temporal here, and for this session we are doing a map guide and we are tackling Hanamura. This is the map. This is probably the most challenging, I would argue, 2CP left in the game currently, since they removed those other ones. And by challenging, I mean, frustrating, hard to attack, that sort of thing. So what we're going to start with here is we're going to look at first point, and as you can see, I've pre-drawn our lanes. We have our primary lane that we'd take down center here, and we have the left lane, which is generally going to lead up to what I would call deck here. You could go around and outside the low ground, but then there's more time for the defense to rotate on you, so usually this outside, far outside sort of fifth lane here is a flanker only route. The standard rotation is going to be through this deck high ground here, and then you're also going to have a rotation to the right, which gets you into cover faster, and that can be attractive, especially if the defense is set up on deck, which some poke comps, some bunker comps are known to do. And from here, you can either go outside, which honestly is fine, or you can circle through the high ground. Either one of those are going to be fine. Sometimes you'll want to circle high ground to push off a defending flex support or something that may be holding out up here. But if we take a quick look, we can see this from the map standpoint. We can see, hey, we have again our left lane mostly is going to take us through here. This really becomes on the far outside of flanker only lane. We've got the window, definitely important thing to consider. We've got this main choke, and we've got our right lane, which takes us through here and either up or all the way outside there. So those are sort of the attack directions that we can go on this point. And they're cool. We know them. The thing that sort of needs to specifically be called out for attackers, though, is something that is becoming, well, let's talk about this. This is a challenging choke here. This is such a challenging choke that it's become very much a regular occurrence, very much something that is expected for Symmetras, attack Symmetras, to drop a TP here, to take their brawl comp to here, immediately run in point and set up on point. And this is perfectly fine. This is a legit attack strategy. This is something defenders have to be aware of. That's something that attackers would do. If they did this, they'd then spend a moment getting up their Symmetra turrets, and they'd be looking to defend the point as it is ticking up with a Reinhardt controlling choke, maybe with a Mei, all those good things. That's something that they would look to do, and that is perfectly fine. We'll talk about how defense breaks that, handles that in just a second. Other common ways to attack this point would be, hey, we're going to use this window in some way. We're going to maybe threaten from this window, maybe with an Ashe, maybe with a Hanzo, maybe with a Widow, maybe with a Genji. Something to threaten from here to help soften up this choke, because you'll see, even though I gave us 3 different lanes here, all of the lanes actually start right here. Or I gave us 5 lanes in some way. And since they all start right here, we have to get through here. How can you do that if you're not using a TP strat? Well, there's only a couple ways that you can do that. You can go, hey, I'm going to threaten from up here with some poke aspect, and that's going to bait some attention. Or I'm going to go ahead and get a diver through, get a flanker through. And that might be, hey, your Reinhardt pushes in and swings, maybe with a Zarya bubble, maybe with some help. And that soft pressure, that soft push, that trade is enough to allow your Tracer to go in, something like that. Or maybe a Diva hops up here and draws some attention to her while an invisible Sombra tries to run through. Whatever the case may be there. But you're generally going to need to help get a flanker in, or to then allow this push to happen once that flanker is prepared, or threaten up here if you're trying to play this standard. Standard meaning, with a brawl comp or with a poke comp. And you want to actually go through this choke in standard choke ways, without a sim TP or a dive comp. The other option, of course, as I just said, is to use a dive comp. Dive comps actually work pretty well on this point. Dive comps will take first reasonably well because they can get in. They can go, hey, we'll send people through here. Maybe we'll roll a ball through. We can force our way through. Full-on dive comps don't actually have too much trouble with this choke, but ladder doesn't particularly like dive. Let's be honest, ladder likes brawl more than dive. Ladder likes some dive heroes, but ladder likes brawl. You're going to see a lot of brawl here. So those are sort of the ways that you can think about this. You either use a sim TP, you trade cooldowns particularly effectively and get some help from like a window poke threat, or from you helping get a flanker through that then is able to threaten, and then you go through, and then depending on what you're up against, you'll rotate. rotate. If you see a poke comp, you're going to want to rotate to the right here with, your brawl comp, whatever you may be looking at there. If they're a poke comp on your own dive, go have fun. If they're set up more to the right there, you may choose to rotate this way. This is a powerful rotation, and this is also a powerful rotation if you use a sim TP. You do not have to do the TP to here. You can do the TP to here to throw a team off, and then you've still got options if you can waterfall down, or you can go over here and still perfectly happily push your way onto point. So that can be a useful thing, especially if you're worried about the defenders using a May wall or something like that. But this is a solid attack path in general. You get up here, you now have a little bit of high ground. You can leave behind a poke aspect to continue to do work as you waterfall in or as you rotate through, whatever the case may be there. That's kind of how we think about this on attack. From a defender's perspective, well, okay, standard choke. If they're running not a dive comp, we would just hold our choke. We would go, hey, there's one choke in a window. This is great. This is a super easy to defend point. And in a lot of ways it is. That's pretty easy. You set up right here. You do your defensive work. You make sure that you have something covering the window. You might be sending a flanker through here when your team pushes in. Like if you get aggressive with your defense, you might be going, hey, flanker needs to do a little work. More often, what's going to happen is you'll have a poke DPS hopping up and down from here, and you would be thinking more about your flanker sort of counter controlling this, or perhaps a Sigma counter controlling this, but some sort of answer here to not let their flanker in, that sort of thing. But when it comes to that sim TP, there's really 2-3 routes you can go. The first route is you do want to scout that they are making the sim play. That means you should have something, perhaps a diva peering through this window, perhaps a sombra, but you should have something that gets you info on what their comp is. If they're coming this way, you should see them quite easily. And therefore, sim TP comps will frequently go this way. And if they go this way, that can be a little bit of a tell that they're going for the sim comp in general, because this direction is a little bit harder to scout. But be aware of it, and then make your decision of, we're going to hit this spot, because the spot that they have to put the TP down in is very predictable. And we are going to hard cleave and hit this spot. We're going to all in effectively on this TP, including booping people off the TP. Because if you destroy the TP when one person has gone through it, when 3 people have gone through it, you're going to win the fight. You're easily going to clean up the people that all stack together to try to go through the TP, but then they got split by the TP, or you're going to go, hey, we broke your TP and now we can back out, or we can keep fighting you because you guys were so focused on the TP that we probably have a nice advantage. So that is one option. The problem is if you're too slow, if you don't destroy that TP, if you're not able to get anyone and they all get through, well, now you're not in the greatest situation, right? Because now they get to set up on point. They'll have plenty of time to put their sim turrets up, and you'll be a little slow. That said, not the end of the world. In organized play, this is usually the solution that you would see happen if you were a brawl comp trying to defend against a sim TP here. The other option you have is just immediately surrender it. If you scouted that they're on the sim TP, you can go, yeah, that's cool. We're not letting you have it. You can have the choke as free as you want. We are going to hold point because we know what you want to do. And there is no shenanigans to go past us like this. Like, yeah, you TP to there. Great. Okay, we have a standard fight. You walk around this way, or you just walk and don't TP, great, we have a standard fight, and we'll treat the point as our choke. On ladder, this can be a little bit easier to do, as long as you can communicate quickly what you want to do. It's a little easier to execute than all-inning the TP and potentially failing, but in organized play, and as you get better, you're going to find that that's not something you do terribly often, stack on the point. And the reason for that is, even if you mess up this breaking of the TP here, or if they successfully execute getting through because they just caught you completely off guard, what you actually want to do as a brawl comp is the same thing that you would do if you were a poke dive comp, a dive comp, any of these real things, which is, hey, we are not going to go in and fight you on this point until we've softened you up. Symmetric comps that have point, you do not walk into, and even though they're the attackers and they don't technically have the point, they realistically have the point. So what you have to do is you have to surround them and pressure them from multiple angles. You can do the, hey, maybe our Reinhardt who was up here didn't get it done, so our Reinhardt is sitting here outside of sim range ready to go in, while our Sigma is threatening from over here. Well, our Ashe maybe started threatening over here and then pops himself up and starts threatening from down here. You need to take some level of angle control. Well, your BAP, who maybe was healing from here before, is now just shooting inside, that sort of thing. You need to soften up the comp a bit, weaken them just a little bit before you commit. Now, this is hard, and this is hard for pug teams to deal with because, someone ends up feeding the sim. The Reinhardt gets too close before your team is ready to commit, or your team doesn't get any poke work done. You do not need a full elimination. You do not have time to get a full elimination most of the time because you are working against ticks. Giving up 2 ticks is perfectly fine. The idea is you should give up, 1 tick, maybe 2 ticks, then beat them, and then you'll have ults so that they won't be able to run that play again. And that's perfectly fine because you can challenge them a lot faster if you have ults, that sort of thing. So that's generally how this works. You try to all in and break that TP, and then even if you messed up and they got through, you hit your surround, you soften it up. Your Reinhardt may have to step on and off point. Your Diva may have to step on and off point. If you're running more of a divey comp, you might send a ball through point, something like that. But you do this very carefully where you're letting them get progress. You are willing to trade them progress to get that poke lead. And you are willing to actually let them somewhat quickly get progress to not ramp up that sim. I know it sucks, but that is how that works. Ultimately, though, you might have to do some on and off to soften them up a bit. So that would sort of be the primary way to defend against this. It's very common to run brawl comps on offense and defense here. It's possible to run dive comps on offense and defense as well. Dive comps in the modern era mostly is going to be Zen Ball stuff. You're really not going to attack with poke comps very often here because this choke is just so bad for poke comps to walk through, and you really don't want to try to walk an Orisa Sigma through here, an Orisa Roadhog through here, a Sigma Roadhog through here. They're not going to have a great time because they have to walk around a short sight line into a brawl comp, and brawl comps are something pretty common to defend with. Poke comps really do want to be able to spread out and do work there. Defenders absolutely can run poke comps. The problem that defense runs into with running poke comps is it's a really poor transition into second. If you're talking like a real poke comp with real poke tanks, you're gonna want to swap off those tanks when it comes into second. If you're running a dive comp on attack, that can be okay, but it struggles to take second without Bob. So it really becomes it can't do much unless it has that cooldown in play. That ultimate in play. Speaking of which, let's talk about second point here. And as we get into second point, this is really the harder one on this map. This is like our standard, oh hey, it's challenging choke. But as we get into second point, we're going to see a few things. There would be the standard push down mid, which is basically bar. This isn't real. You don't actually want to do this. There is the primary actual push, which is going to be up through high ground. And this is your primary push. This is what you are generally looking to do 70, 80, 90% of the time. It sucks, but this is what you're looking to do. And then we have our left push here, which is generally going to involve either movement abilities or a teleporter into a push through left side here. And the problem that you run into is this high ground is extremely strong. This is extremely strong high ground, so you kind of have to get it, or at least get the defenders off of it as the attackers. So what can we really do? How does this work? And are there other lanes that we need to talk about? Not really. You can do a little bit of transitioning. There's a transition through here that you should be aware of. This is a meaningful route, pretending to go mid and then dropping. I'll cover a bit more of that in a moment. And yes, there's the ability in theory to go, yes, I'll go down to low ground and loop back up, and that's not a real push. You're dreaming. Stop kidding yourself. Okay, so how do we actually take second then as the attackers? Well, we look at second, and there's some things that we need to do. Like I said, the majority of your pushes are going to have to be through here. You're going to have to go like this. You're going to have to push through this narrow hallway. The defenders are probably going to be on Brawl because it was pretty good for first and it's even better for second. Yes, they have the ability to be on some Winston comps, that sort of thing, but they're probably going to be on Brawl, and you're going to then go, hey, I have to push through this narrow hallway, through this tiny choke to try to push out and fight them up here, and they have a huge advantage every single time. So what do? Mostly you keep banging your head into the wall until the dice come up on 7 and you win. Mostly that's the answer. But we do have a few tricks to make things a bit easier than that. To go, hey, can we load the dice a little bit to make 7 come up a little bit more often? And the answer is yes. The first and strongest trick that you're going to have as attackers is part of why the sim TP strat is actually so common on first. Taking first really isn't that challenging. Yes, it can be a bit of a pain on ladder, but the ability to play dive comps to take first, for example, quite fine, not really something that's a big deal. The ability to threaten that window with a sniper to help get the choke through, the ability to cycle cooldowns and then get through, that all exists. The real benefit to this sim comp, yes, it helps take first. The real benefit is this left push. But I just said the left push wasn't all that strong. So what am I talking about? Well, having a sim wall here, being able to drop Sim's ultimate, actually completely neutralizes this defender's high ground. So if you drop a sim wall, and you can drop your sim wall like this, you can drop your sim wall like this, doesn't hugely matter as long as you do it right. Generally, you drop it more like this, especially if you say came through with the bastion. But hey, you can go here, with your sim wall up, that high ground becomes meaningless, and now you are forcing a point fight that the defenders were not really set up well to defend you against. Yes, they could try to come defend over here, but then if you didn't actually go this way, they're now in a situation where they do not have their strong high ground to defend against you having tried to snowball a mid push, or even worse, you went top right and they got stuck and maybe used your sim TP to speed up the rotation to do that. So this is actually a strong push and one of the best ways to take the point, but really only works when you have that sim wall. Sim is incredibly good for taking second, but only when she has that wall. She's not very good the rest of the time. So you generally end up finding teams will swap off of her if that snowball doesn't work there. So, okay, that's cool. So with one specific ult, we can try to take second a different way than going up there. Were there other ways that we can try to take second here? Sort of. We can maybe try to do what can work well when defenders have good positions. Well, on most maps, it would be let's fake a rotation, say here, and then race them. Maybe we'll use Lucio's speed boost, go back up here, and try to rotate through and go, hey, we've got this, and now you guys dropped, but we baited you. We actually went back and came up here. The problem is, as long as defenders don't drop until you actually touch this bridge, defenders are easily going to be, and I'm talking their tanks, they don't need to drop like their hit scan and such, they can easily beat you on the rotation, back up to high ground here. So that's not really on the table. Definitely not worth trying to organize on ladder, where it's going to take time to organize, take time to get people on the same page, and then it's still not going to work. But what can work a little bit better is pretending to do this mid push and then dropping left. This isn't amazing. This is still going to give you this same left push, except I'm assuming that you don't have a sim wall. So why is Temporal advocating this push even existing? Well, you're not going to win with this push. You're not. You're not really expecting to win with this push. It's not as high probability as that top right push. But you know what? It sort of looks like and feels like maybe it could be threatening. In practice, it's not. The defenders are going to be able to leave their poke DPS up here, potentially leave supports up here. That's assuming they haven't set supports up by spawns, which has been totally doable in some metas. Because the defenders aren't really worried about speed and things like that on this map, it's actually been very common on this map in dive metas and in historic dive metas and in brawl metas to go, hey, we could run double flex support like Ana plus Zen, something like that, and sort of greed that. This is one of the maps that people have been able to get away with that on, but not worried about that right now. What we're instead looking at is, hey, they're going to be able to leave stuff up here. Maybe they're going to put someone up here too. You should mostly just lose when you come in on this left push. Not as hard as you would from a mid push, but you should mostly just lose. And the reason you don't lose as hard is you're able to, use that Rhine shield, use that one directional. All of your enemies are mostly in front of you, much more so than if you push here, where now you've got big swings in terms of where your enemies are. They're there, they might even be over there. That's not fun. This tends to be a better push. It's mostly in front of you type thing. Still probably going to lose, but that leaves a bit of a trace in the opponent's mind, a bit of a wait, they did that, and that can cause your opponents to shift a bit, which can make your next push through here a little bit more successful because they've adjusted their positioning a little bit to take advantage of, oh wait, they might push on, from the attacker's perspective, the left here. That's not great. That's not great. It's not great to spend a push to go do that, but if you failed here for 2, 3, 4 pushes in a row on this top right push, mixing in one of those just to try to keep them honest, just to make them deploy a little bit more with this in mind, can ultimately be worth it. I know it sucks. I know it's not great. The only great thing that you're going to have to try to take this point really is a sim wall, but that is the option. In terms of other things that in neutral pushes can make this a little easier to take for sort of the standard brawl that we'll see coming through here, would of course be, hey, if you want to put a poke DPS up here, break off a single person, you're still pushing generally with 5 through your top left there, but putting up an Ashe, a Hanzo, something along those lines to do some good poke work can help open things up. You're hitting from that second angle, and this is a place that you want your poke DPS in to get finishes done anyways. When it comes to actually finishing off a second point defense with that huge respawn advantage for defenders, one of the sort of checkmate things is getting some sort of poke DPS up here anyways. You want to have tanks on the point and some sort of poke aspect back here to try to finish off the point anyways and not get thrown off after 1 or 2 ticks like that. Adam in Charge with a 199 super chat saying, oh look, it's poor non-owl coach. Hello. Thank you, Adam. I appreciate that $2 super chat there. So that's one way that you can help unlock it. The other way you can try to unlock this, of course, is sending flankers through left side. Sending a single flanker through left side can do a couple things for you. It can threaten point. It can threaten supports if they've chosen to set supports back there for either a brawl comp or a dive comp, that sort of thing. It's not amazing. Truth be told, neither is that poke aspect over there, and you generally don't want to do both if you're trying to take that top right there, and most of the time you should be trying to take that top right there if you're running any sort of brawl aspect, or even if you're not running brawl aspect, even if you're running divey, they're going to be over there and you're going to try to take that. Your pathing may just differ. So that brings us to other options. Well, we aren't really going to be on poke trying to take second, and poke would suck because other than poke that have the ability to spring themselves up here, we're not really going to be able to get enough angles to do a good job of trying to take this point with poke. This choke just sucks too much. This high ground that the defenders are favored for is just too good. So brawl sucks to push. Dive can push, but dive is really going to struggle to occupy the point. If we're talking modern dive, which is mostly Zen ball cops, it's really going to struggle to put enough presence on the point outside of having that Bob ultimate. Make sure that you actually send your Bob in such a way that it does occupy point if you're Ashe, that you don't try to send Bob across this and watch him fall in the pit. I've certainly seen that happen in some 4,400 games. Quite fun to watch, but make sure you send it in that way. Totally doable to win this point with dive, but you really aren't going to be able to take this point to win this except when you have Bob. Like, cleanly beating the opponents, cleanly beating some of these heavier comps when they have this spawn advantage, when they have the tools they do. Yes, you're better able to dive them on high ground, but really this still isn't even the best dive. Yes, you can come through here. Yes, you can try to come from mid. Yes, you can come from behind them, but that stage to get behind them is very open in terms of you getting poked out on the way and not being able to show up with resources. This, is still coming through a very narrow, easily controlled hallway for them. Still not going to have a great time. And even then, you have to remove thousands of hit points from the point because they're a heavy brawl comp quite frequently. You can also defend this point with dive. That's a little easier to do. Winston or ball varieties. Okay, so let me take a final look here. Okay. So we talked about not dropping too early for this. We talked about the high ground. We talked about really how this works. It's a 2-point map. It's not all that complicated. It does suck for attackers, defenders. Really, you don't have too much to be worried about. Don't fall too hard for bait, even if they push through here of, oh, they might push through here again. Don't drop too early. Like if a team shows up here, for example, don't assume that they're pushing mid. Actually make them push, to bridge. It can be like a toe on the bridge. That's enough to justify potentially your Reinhardt dropping, that sort of thing. And obviously, you don't have to play this here. You can play you can defend with other things if you want to, but ultimately Brawl does do quite well on this map for the snowball potential that attackers have, for the insane chokes that you get as defenders. It is a pretty common Brawl map. It is ultimately a Brawl favored map that we are looking at. In terms of power positions on this map, this is the strongest one by far. This is useful. You can obviously use this. You can remember 2 CP maps. This is not dead space in the middle here. This is space that should be poked at and should be threatened. You should, as the defenders, you have to make sure that you fall back to the positions that you want in time, but you can use these windows, and you should be using these windows to get a little bit of poke done and make the attackers actually earn their space, as well as to do the scouting to figure out, are they doing a TP play over there, that sort of thing. Yeah. Was there anything else that I needed? I think that mostly does it. Let's go ahead and... Oh, power positions on first point. There we go. In terms of first point, defense, we talked about you're generally going to set up a Brawl defense over there. You frequently will see supports back here. Sometimes when you're defending with dive, you will see a support over here. Perfectly reasonable. Make sure you clear it off high ground when you're rotating through as the attacking team. Nothing too wild. Make sure that you've got your appropriate marks over here. This side is generally the side that poke DPS are going to play from. Flankers will sometimes threaten here as their team pushes out with soft, or they will defensively hold there. But that's going to do it. Let's go ahead and catch up on chat and see what questions you guys have. Okay. Did you how to counter Sim TP as a defender? I did that. If you have more questions, let me know. Havana third, hardest choke. Don't at me. More tools to break that, honestly. I've covered Havana. I have a map guide for Havana. It's the first one in the map guide playlist, which I've actually linked in the description below. But when it comes to Havana third, that choke certainly seems challenging, but the reality is right side, from an attacker's perspective, is criminally underplayed. Sending a poke DPS through right side, supported or unsupported, does a ton to unlock that point. And once you teach a team that, you will find that they got held for 2 minutes, 3 minutes on third before they finally pushed in, basically just evaporates. How to counter May wall as the attackers here. I mean, the May wall isn't the end as the attack. Oh, May wall, sure, got it. So defense uses a May wall and you're attacking. Sure, couple ways that you can do that. Couple ways that you can counter that. One of which is, of course, hey, May wall is a lot less threatening to you if you're on dive heroes. That would be the easiest thing. And again, Zen Ball does have a snowball opportunity with Bob to try to take second. They're just worse into the neutral after that than a Brawl comp is. So that's the first and easiest way. Next way is really going to be May walls are a lot less dangerous to Rein Diva than they are to Rein Zarya, and Diva's ability to pop up over a May wall and DM Rein to help protect it as everyone shoots the pillar to help him get out, that can help, as well as Bap's ability to jump up and throw a lamp solves the May wall crisis quite reasonably. Now, ideally, your Reinhardt's trying to bait it, your Reinhardt's not getting caught, and your Reinhardt is pushing when you have a slight tempo advantage in terms of cooldown. So, hey, they don't have May wall. That would be the easiest way to do it, but you can't count on that to happen, and you absolutely do have the tools to answer the May wall. Just make sure you're also hard pressuring that pillar to break it to then send people through, because, hey, that's what you're looking to do. The May wall is part of their engage. Just have the Bastion shoot it down. That can work. Don't get me wrong. Shenanigans can be fun on this map in terms of you do your sim brawl attack, you go for your play, and as part of your sim brawl, you go swap out your second DPS. You keep your sim that has a wall for a Bastion, you do your TP across left side, and then suddenly you've got a sim wall with a Bastion to cover point. That can be pretty broken in days past, but hey. Okay. Those 40 FPS dips? I know. YL team TP to high ground rather than objective. What you're really looking at there, you'll usually see them TP either to just in front of point or to this left deck here. And sometimes that's to avoid dealing with a defensive Mei that they don't want to get split by. That's a pretty common reason to do it. Another reason is they actually want to be able to leave behind someone because, hey, they saw the defense is actually set up more on point, for example, and they want to be able to leave someone of their own behind to be able to be a poke threat up here, or they want to leave their support up here where it's a little safer to help them, support the point. A BAP, for example, is perfectly happy to be up here, would rather be up here than down on point. Same thing with the Nana. The BAP can get there themselves, but hey. Okay, no problem, Tim. Glad you're enjoying them. How to defend window without losing too much yourself. How to defend window without losing too much yourself. Oh, you should be set up in such a way that someone is thinking about window. Thinking about window is generally going to be a case of, hey, you might have an Ash Mercy up here if you're playing more of a poke comp. You might have something up here that's just like a Hanzo. Maybe you're playing a Brawl comp, but you've got a Tracer still, and your Tracer can be doing the, hey, I'm threatening this. You've, of course, got the ability to go, hey, D.Va can go up here, and D.Va is constantly sort of ready to go up here. And you need to have some level of defense on that because this window will threaten either your front line or it might threaten a support that you have in the back. And you don't want your support zoned because that makes it a lot easier for them to push. So D.Va is a pretty common answer, though she won't full-time do this. She can't live here. It costs her boosters every time she goes and clears it. It's more frequent, I would say, that you have either a poke DPS or if you don't have a poke DPS, you have a flanker sort of help control this because a flanker will sometimes be thinking about controlling this side anyways. And they can control it and they can call for that help. They can control it a little more full time and then get that D.Va help, for example, get that Sigma help, for example, get that BAP or Ana help, for example, on the window as the little push over the edge. Okay. If I were to rework 2CP as a gameplay mode, how would you make it not feel terrible to play? I mean, the real answer is organized play. 2CP is less bad in organized play, but even in organized play, it's not the best game mode. It's got too much snowball potential. It's got the most randomness to it, along with Koth. I know. People aren't going to like that take. But I would say if it was 2CP, what would I want to do? I'd probably want to soften some of the chokes and then to compensate for that, lower the amount of time that is available in the game. And by softening some of the chokes, what does that mean? That would mean Hanamura Second just isn't allowed to exist like this. If I were to rework Hanamura Second, I would probably have to create a situation where this ramp is a little more accessible. This ramp is a little more accessible to more heroes. And then there's also a ramp up to here. I think this would do a ton to soften up this point from to make this point easier to attack. First point, we could do something similar to what they did to Eichenwald, where we could add another path. That would be perfectly reasonable. Maybe you even just lower this window. Maybe you even just get rid of this box, lower this window, and make this a small path. Maybe it's like a tunnel thing like it is on Eichenwald, but you make it a tunnel that something can go through. I would then say Volskaya honestly is mostly fine. Volskaya is really not that broken. And then I'd look at Anubis and I'd need to do something to Anubis. Specifically, we're probably, again, in that the left side on Anubis's first choke probably gets its own secondary entrance that doesn't fully expose you to the attackers like Eichenwald first got. And then for second point, we'd have to do something as well. My guess on what to do for second would be on the right side, probably shrink the size of the stuff blocking things on the right so that left lane and right lane can influence each other for attackers a little more quickly so that they can cross support lanes a little more quickly there. That's probably what I'd do for the maps. That's just off the top of my head, though. Temporal with the scarf. Okay. Just got here, spent all day watching your videos, Temp. Glad to hear it, Brandon. What about second point against Junk, lol? I noticed that as a problem in low Rex. Oh no, it's totally a problem, but it doesn't change. Like, pushing into Brawl absolutely sucks, but this is still the right way for Brawl comps to push into Brawl, even if they have a Junkrat or a Mei. A Junkrat or a Mei will make it way harder to push this, but even if they have them, this is still the right way to push most of the time. You basically need to go, we're running dive and we're revolving around Bob, or we're using a sim wall push to the left. Those are your only, like, good answers, but those are ultimate-based answers. Sorry, but it sucks. This map is not fair. I don't have a better answer for you. I'm giving you all the tools I can to beat it, but this map is not fair. And mostly you're looking for a, hey, can we do this in such a way that they used 4 ults when we used 1 and now we can, or we have a 55% chance of winning the next fight because we have a massive ult advantage. Yes, it takes that massive of an ult advantage. Pushing second with Brawl is rough. Pushing second with Poke really isn't much better. You can sometimes go, hey, let's pop a Hanzo up over here, an Ashe up over here, and do that sort of thing, but they're going to stuff you out pretty easily. You really are going to have to end up using dive tanks or full dive, and, you know, if you're going to push it without Brawl, full Poke really isn't an option, and in those situations, again, they can deny you pretty easily, and it's not a lot of swaps for them to go, hey, let's use our own Winston to shut down the threat of Ashes, Hanzos, that sort of things, with an Ana pocketing them, all that. Like, this isn't significantly easier to push on dive. I would say it's probably a little easier to push on dive because it's not easier. It feels less bad to push on dive, but ultimately, you've still got to remove them from there, and then you've got to get them off the point. It's going to suck for everyone. Just go down main, they won't expect it. The problem, blah, is that doesn't move their defense. Going down left side sometimes moves their defense. Going down main doesn't cause their defense to move for future pushes. So it's a bad push, and it doesn't even have a chance of setting your next push up to be better. And I know you were being sarcastic. I don't consider pairs to be in the game, and I don't consider Lunar Colony to be in the game either. They're not in competitive. So yes, I mean, you know, toughest joke in competitive, but yes. Okay. I think that's going to do it. If you guys are enjoying the content, please do drop a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. Please leave a comment down below on the map that you would like to be covered next. Whatever I see gets the next votes will have some influence on which map I cover next here. I can't guarantee that I'll pick the one with the most votes, but do check that out. Leave a comment, drop a like. And lastly, if you are looking to get coaching, because that is something I do, join my Discord in the description below there to see rates. Once again, the playlist for the rest of these map guides is the top line of my description, so feel free to check out the other map guides as well. And we'll go ahead and call it there.